All right, everyone, let's get settled. Take a seat. Welcome to your final capstone lecture in the Accounting Undergraduate Program. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you today because we're going to dig into something pretty incredible. Over the past few weeks, you've all submitted some phenomenal project research on the world's biggest brands. And today, I'm going to summarize those findings. We're going to break down the financial and operational architecture of 6 massive companies, looking exactly at how they globalized, the roadblocks they slammed into, and how they handled them. My goal for this explainer is to take all that brilliant number crunching you did and elevate it into a pure strategic masterclass.
To kick us off, I really want you to think about this question. What on earth connects IKEA's Swedish meatballs, Uniqlo's Japanese textiles, and Canva's Silicon Valley software as a service model? I mean, at first glance, absolutely nothing, right? They operate in totally different industries, have totally different supply chains, and target completely different consumers. Yet, they've all successfully cracked the exact same code. They took localized success and morphed it into unshakable global empires. So today, we're going to extract the DNA of that success. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Decoding the global playbook. 2. Scaling through strict standardization. 3. The art of localizing. 4. Overcoming global roadblocks. And finally, 5. Your future as strategists. Section 1. Decoding the global playbook. The core strategies of expansion. Let's start with the fundamental strategic tension that literally every single multinational corporation has to navigate if they actually want to survive outside their home turf. Every global strategy basically boils down to a massive tug of war between two opposing forces: global standardization on the one side and local adaptation on the other. So the big million-dollar question is this: do you achieve massive economies of scale by keeping your product exactly the same everywhere, or do you eat some extra cost to tweak your formula and win over local hearts? As we synthesize your project data today, you're going to see that the world's most profitable companies don't just blindly pick one. They build highly calculated financial structures to balance both. Moving on to Section 2, scaling through strict standardization, the masters of scale. We're going to start by looking at the companies that lean heavily toward that standardization side, the ones conquering international markets by keeping their core products almost entirely uniform across the globe. 190 plus. That is the staggering number of countries Canva currently operates in. How do you even reach that instantly? Well, through a B2B and B2C freemium software as a service model. Canva uses single source coding and centralized tech governance. By keeping everything in a homogenized 100% digital ecosystem, they just erase cross-border financial barriers entirely. Their standardization gives them maximum economies of scale while totally locking down their intellectual property. It's a completely borderless financial engine. Now let's see how that concept maps to physical manufacturing. Take Tesla. They don't treat their cars as customized regional vehicles. Nope. To them, cars are just universal, standardized hardware shells. They completely ignore local tastes to max out their production experience curves. And why? Because the physical car is really just a delivery mechanism for their true margin driver, recurring SaaS revenue. They're exporting a digital product, their FSD version 14, which, once the AI is trained, has a marginal cost of practically zero to deploy globally for $99 a month. And get this, that exact same standardization strategy is what Tesla is banking on for their Optimus Gen 3 humanoid robots. They're targeting a mind-blowing $10 trillion labor market, with production kicking off in summer 2026. You just cannot capture a market that vast without absolute uncompromising standardization in how you build things. Which brings us to Uniqlo. Their CEO, Tadashi Yanai, built the brand on this massive ambition of being the #1 brand worldwide. Their secret weapon? The lifewear concept. Simple, high-quality, functional, everyday clothing. Because they aren't chasing those hyper-specific, fast-moving local fashion trends, roughly 90% of their product lineup is identical worldwide. This universal design strategy creates huge economies of scale in production and a rock-solid global brand image. It lets them offer high-quality essentials at a price pretty much anyone can afford. All right, Section 3, the art of localizing, tweaking the formula. Because standardizing everything isn't the only way to win. If we flip to the other side of the strategic spectrum, we find the giants that purposefully take on higher costs to adapt their products, effectively bypassing local barriers and really embedding themselves into regional cultures. Take IKEA, for example. Yes, they rely on that flat-pack product architecture to keep prices low across their 63 markets. And we all know that iconic blue and yellow maze layout is exactly the same wherever you go. But look at the local tweaks. In the US, they bump up their product sizing to offer bigger beds and larger kitchens. And the restaurants, they totally adopt the menu. You'll find rendang and nasi goreng in Indonesia, dumplings and congee in China, biryani and samosas in India. They even adapt to Indian market norms by partnering up with local service providers to handle professional assembly for the customers. Then you have Nestlé, taking it a step further with what we call a transnational strategy. Think about Nescafé. They have a super centralized visual identity and strict R&D standards, all shielded by their black box strategy back in Switzerland to lock in that global scale. But contrast that with how hyper-local they get. Through their PPP strategy, popularly positioned products, they adapt to local tastes, like literally creating matcha Kit Kats just for Japan. They also adapt to local economic realities by pushing affordable sachets in emerging markets like Indonesia, specifically catering to consumers who are managing tight daily budgets. Samsung plays a highly calculated structural game here. They standardize their core tech globally, but localize the features to meet regional needs, cultures, and regulations. But even more importantly, from a structural standpoint, Samsung expands using wholly owned subsidiaries. Doing it this way lets them bypass specific trade barriers and scoop up global revenue, all while hedging their bets against local economic or climate risks through massive diversification. Section 4. Overcoming global roadblocks, navigating the hazards. Of course, none of these global expansions just happen in a vacuum. Every single time a company steps into a new market, they invite a whole host of operational, economic, and regulatory hurdles. Let's see how they actually navigate them. Now, as future accountants, your ears should definitely be burning right about now. This breakdown maps the core strategy of our 6 companies against their absolute biggest operational risks. Uniqlo's affordable premium vibe risks getting stuck in the middle between true luxury and fast fashion. IKEA, relying on 50-plus countries for sourcing, means they deal with non-stop supply chain disruptions, which is why they need 30 global distribution centers just as a buffer. Canva lives and dies by IP security. Tesla faces crushing R&D costs to keep their tech scaling. And Samsung, they constantly have to hedge against economic turbulence. It's like a giant, high-stakes puzzle. And then think about how this spills over into regulatory risk. Take Nestlé. Operating in the food and beverage industry means constantly navigating an absolute maze of host country health mandates. They have this continuous global reformulation process where they strategically adjust sugar, sodium, and saturated fat levels in products like Nescafé Gold. And guys, this isn't just to be healthy. It's a sheer financial necessity. They have to comply with local regulations to avoid massive regional sugar taxes that would literally destroy their profit margins overnight. But honestly, the absolute biggest roadblock to global expansion is macroeconomic instability. Your case study on South Africa was a perfect, stark look at this. You have a market weighed down by rising public debt, surging inflation, and endemic unemployment that recently hit 30%. Plus, South Africa perfectly demonstrates the undeniable link between public health and economic growth. With 20% of the population HIV positive and the brutal subsequent impact of COVID-19 causing an estimated 8% economic contraction, real GDP per person has just shrunk repeatedly. This right here is exactly why companies like Samsung and Nestlé have to build highly diversified global portfolios. They simply cannot afford to have their entire balance sheet wiped out by a single macroeconomic or public health crisis in one host nation. Section 5. Your future as strategists, beyond number crunching. We've decoded the global playbook, we've analyzed the masters of scale, explored the art of localization, and mapped out those macroeconomic roadblocks. Now, I want to pivot and talk directly to you. How does all of this actually connect to your future career? It connects because global strategy is, fundamentally, an accounting architecture. Think about IKEA's democratic design framework. Before a single sketch is even drawn for a new product, the price point is already fixed. That is brilliant, aggressive cost accounting literally dictating global design. Look at Tesla treating physical cars as empty shells just to deploy high-margin software. That is an absolute masterclass in margin analysis and shifting revenue recognition models. Look at Samsung using wholly owned subsidiaries. That's strategic corporate structuring and risk hedging in action. Everything these companies do begins and ends with the exact financial frameworks that you are learning to build right now. Which leaves us with one final thought as you get ready to graduate and step out into the real world. You've seen the data, you understand the risks. The global playbook is sitting right in front of you. So my question to you is this: in your career, will you be content to just sit in the back office and crunch the historical numbers, or are you going to use these frameworks to architect the next great global strategy? The choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for a fantastic semester, and really, good luck out there.